I've spent most of my life studying plants that most people walk past without even noticing. Plants that hide in plain sight between the cracks of sidewalks and the corners of backyards, along the edges of driveways. And over the years, as I've dug deeper into their stories, their chemistry, and their traditional uses, I've realized something that still surprises me today. Some of the most fascinating plants, the ones people now call weeds, once held powerful value in traditional herbal systems around the world. They weren't just background greenery, they were part of everyday life. Now, of course, times have changed. Modern culture tends to favor store-bought solutions, packaged remedies, and imported ingredients. But right outside your window, quietly growing without anyone's permission, is a library of plants that past generations respected, understood, and used thoughtfully. And today, I want to take you through that hidden world slowly, carefully, and with the kind of respect these plants deserve. This isn't a hype video. It's not a list you've already heard 1,000 times. This is a deep, experience-driven look from someone who has spent decades observing, learning, and testing these plants in real environments. I'm not here to tell you miracles. I'm here to share the real uses, the historical context, the scientific research that exists, and the practical wisdom that comes with years in the field. So take a moment, settle in, and let us walk together through the wild medicine growing right in your own backyard, the kind that doesn't need advertising, that doesn't sit on store shelves, and that carries a story stretching back centuries. When I first started studying wild plants seriously, I thought I had to travel far from home to find anything meaningful deep into forests, up mountainous trails, or into untouched meadows. But the longer I practiced, the more I realized the land closest to us often holds just as much richness as the most remote wilderness. The plants that grow freely in backyards are often resilient, adaptable, and surprisingly complex. They thrive without fertilizer, without cultivation, without human assistance. In many traditions, these traits were seen as signs of strength and vitality. But here's where things get interesting. Historically, people didn't separate wild plants from medicinal plants. They simply used what grew around them. If you lived in ancient Europe, you relied on the plants common to your region. If you lived in Asia, Africa, or the Americas, you did the same. Knowledge passed down through families and communities, shaped by generations of observation and lived experience. Today, however, that continuity is broken. Most people no longer recognize the plants under their feet. They see green leaves and assume it's all meaningless. But every plant has a story, and in many cases that story includes hundreds of years of traditional use. And that's what we're exploring in this video. Not promises, not claims, but the deep, often forgotten relationship between humans and the plants that once surrounded us daily. Before we dive into the categories, I want to explain my approach because it shapes everything I share in this script. I always look at plants from 4 angles. 1. Historical and cultural use. How did different cultures use this plant? For what purposes? In what forms? And most importantly, was its use consistent across cultures, which often hints at a genuine pattern? 2. Ecology and plant behavior. Plants don't grow randomly. Their environment shapes their chemistry. Understanding their habitat helps explain why they were valued. 3. Modern scientific research. Not exaggerated promises, just what current research suggests about their potential properties. 4. Practical experience. Years of working with plants teaches you things no textbook can. Their smell, their texture, how they respond in different seasons, how they behave when dried, infused, or extracted. This 4-pillar approach keeps things grounded, respectful, and rooted in reality, not hype. And with that foundation, we can begin exploring the 10 categories of wild backyard medicine, each filled with specific examples of plants that have been appreciated for centuries. If there's one category I always tell beginners to start with, it's this one, the gentle plants. These are the ones traditionally used for creating calming teas, soothing poultices, or mild infusions. Across many cultures, they were considered the everyday helpers, safe, accessible, and easy to recognize. One of the first plants I ever learned from this category was plantain, not the fruit Planago major or Planago lanceolata. It grows almost everywhere humans live. You'll find it along walkways, beside garages, near mailboxes. Historically, plantain was used as a multipurpose soother. In European traditions, it was valued for its calming effect on the skin. In North America, indigenous groups used it in poultices. Across cultures, its role was surprisingly consistent, a grounding, gentle herb. Another example is chamomile, which many people know from store-bought tea, but few realize often grows wild. Chamomile has been used traditionally for relaxation and calming. In the wild, it's smaller, more fragrant, and often more potent in aroma than its cultivated cousins. For centuries, people used it in teas, simple infusions, and even as a bedtime plant placed near pillows. And then there's lemon balm, one of my personal favorites. This plant spreads easily and loves backyard soil. Historically, it was cherished in European monastic gardens for its uplifting scent and gentle qualities. Even just rubbing its leaves between your fingers can create a sense of calm. These natural soothers aren't flashy. They don't demand attention. But they've been trusted for centuries because of one simple truth. Gentle plants often have the most universal value. What calming plants have you noticed growing around your home? Let me know. I always love hearing what grows naturally in different regions. Every traditional healing system around the world has a category of plants used to support digestion. And interestingly, many of these plants grow right in backyards or nearby fields, often dismissed as weeds today. Take dandelion, for example. Most people see it as an unwanted intruder in their lawns. But historically, dandelion was valued from root to flower. The leaves were used as greens in springtime, and the roots were roasted or dried. European herbal traditions respected dandelion for its association with digestive support. In traditional Chinese medicine, a similar species had comparable uses. Modern research has shown dandelion contains compounds that may support digestive processes, though the specifics are still being studied. But the consistency across cultures speaks volumes. Another example is yarrow. Wild yarrow grows in clusters of tiny white flowers, and it has a long history in both European and Native American traditions. It was often used in teas or simple preparations to support the body after meals. Its aromatic quality made it useful in traditional digestive tonics. And then there's purslane, a succulent plant that loves disturbed soil and thrives even in harsh conditions. In many Mediterranean and Middle Eastern cultures, purslane was both a food and a traditional digestive helper. People added it to salads or stews not just for nutrition, but for its refreshing quality. What fascinates me about this category is how universal it is. No matter where you go in the world, people learn to use the plants around them to support digestion, a reminder of how closely humans once lived with the land. This next category includes some of the most iconic wild plants, those traditionally used to support breathing, particularly during seasonal changes. One of the most well-known is mullein. If you've ever seen a tall, fuzzy-leaved plant with a spike that shoots straight up into the air, that's mullein. Historically, people used mullein leaves in teas, infusions, and even as smoke-free inhalation herbs. Many cultures viewed it as a plant associated with respiratory wellness. What makes mullein fascinating is how consistent this use was across continents. Whether in Old World traditions or indigenous North American practices, mullein often played a similar role. Another plant in this category is coltsfoot, with its bright yellow flowers that bloom long before its leaves appear. Coltsfoot was historically used in Europe in traditional formulas for breathing comfort. The ancient Romans even wrote about it. Though modern safety research advises caution, its place in history is undeniable. And then there's pine, yes, regular pine trees. Pine needles have been used in traditional teas across many cultures, valued for their aromatic compounds and refreshing qualities. In some regions, people simply crush the needles to inhale their invigorating scent. This category reminds me how deeply embedded certain plants are in cultural memory. Even people with no herbal background often feel that mullein or pine are associated with the lungs, and that speaks to centuries of tradition passed down through experience. When people talk about wild plants, they often imagine fragile little herbs with tiny leaves. But some of the strongest, most nutrient-dense greens grow in the most unexpected places between sidewalk cracks, behind garages, or in soil considered too poor for vegetables. These plants don't just survive, they thrive under pressure. And historically, that resilience made them valuable. One of the first wild greens I ever truly appreciated was nettles. Yes, the stinging kind. But once handled with care, nettles have a long history in European and Asian traditions as nutrient-rich spring greens. Generations used them in soups, teas, or cooked dishes not for hype or trendiness, but because they appeared at the exact moment when winter food reserves were low and people needed nourishment. Another overlooked green is lamb's quarters, sometimes called wild spinach. This plant pops up everywhere, from compost piles to backyard corners. Indigenous peoples across North America often collected it as a staple green, valuing its deep mineral profile. In fact, many foragers today consider it superior to cultivated spinach in both taste and texture. And then there's sorrel, a tart, lemony green that thrives in partial shade. Sorrel appears in European traditional cooking, especially in spring. Its bright flavor made it a favorite in soups and simple stews, and for good reason. Its refreshing taste signaled the end of winter monotony. These wild greens remind me of something essential. Plants don't need human help to become powerful. In many cases, the less we intervene, the stronger they become. Wild greens feed themselves from untouched soil, adapting to wind, rain, insects, and drought. Their strength becomes their story and, historically, their value. What wild greens grow in your yard or neighborhood? Have you ever noticed how fast they return after being pulled? If there's one category where backyard plants truly shine, it's this one. Throughout history, people turned to plants growing closest to home whenever their skin needed support, whether it was for soothing, cleansing, or simple daily care. And surprisingly, some of the most effective plants were the ones considered bothersome today. The first plant that comes to mind is aloe, yes. Most people grow it intentionally now, but in many warm regions, aloe naturalizes and grows almost wild. Its use spans continents: Africa, Asia, South America, the Mediterranean. Aloe was traditionally valued for its ability to soothe irritated skin. Even today, many households instinctively reach for a leaf when they need a simple, calming application. But if there's a true backyard superstar in this category, it's calendula. Historically grown in cottage gardens, calendula spread by seed and naturalized in many regions. European herbal traditions used its bright orange flowers in salves and infusions for general skin comfort. It was prized for its gentle, uplifting nature. And of course, I can't talk about traditional skin allies without mentioning plantain again. Yes, it's so versatile, it appears in more than one category. The leaves of plantain were often crushed or made into poultices for cleansing the skin. Native American, European, and Asian traditions all mention its usefulness. Another fascinating plant is cleavers, known for its sticky, Velcro-like texture. Historically, it was used in washes or compresses. Its gentle nature made it a favorite for traditional skin tonics. Watching how these plants grow teaches you a lot. Calendula follows the sun. Cleavers climbs and clings. Plantain stays close to the earth. Their growth habits mirror their traditional roles: grounding, soothing, gently supportive. Some plants don't just grow, they announce themselves. Their scent fills the air when you brush past them. Historically, aromatic herbs played significant roles in homes, rituals, and daily life. Their fragrances weren't just pleasant. They were considered protective. One of the most widespread aromatic plants is rosemary, which can naturalize in warm climates. In ancient Mediterranean cultures, rosemary symbolized clarity and protection. People burned it, infused it in oils, and used it in cooking. Even today, its scent carries an unmistakable grounding quality. Another powerful aromatic is sage, especially common sage, which often escapes gardens and grows wild. Sage appears in European folk traditions as a plant of cleansing. The Romans held it in high esteem, and medieval herbalists documented it extensively. Then there's thyme, a plant with a long history in both culinary and traditional wellness practices. Wild thyme thrives on hillsides, stone walls, and neglected garden patches. Its aroma is unmistakable, sharp, warm, and invigorating. But perhaps the most ancient of all is mint. Mint spreads aggressively, often ending up in places you never intended. But historically, this trait was celebrated. Mint appeared in Greek, Roman, Middle Eastern, and Asian traditions as a refreshing plant used in teas, baths, and foods. What I love most about aromatic backyard plants is their presence. Even when you're not using them, they're part of the environment, lifting the air, shifting the atmosphere, reminding you that nature communicates through scent. Now, let me be very clear. We're not making health claims here. We're talking about historical uses, what cultures believed, practiced, and passed down. And when it comes to plants associated with supporting general wellness during seasonal changes, every culture had its favorites. One of the most famous wild plants in this category is elder. Elder trees or shrubs often grow around old houses, fence lines, or abandoned spaces. Historically, the flowers and berries were used in various preparations. European traditions considered elder a protective tree, not just physically but symbolically. Another plant widely used across cultures is echinacea, especially species like Echinacea purpurea and Echinacea angustifolia. Prairie tribes in North America used it extensively in traditional medicine. Early European settlers quickly adopted its uses after observing indigenous practices. The third plant worth mentioning here is garlic mustard. While considered invasive today, early settlers and European immigrants recognized it immediately as a familiar herb. Traditionally, garlic mustard was used both as food and as a plant believed to support overall vitality. Finally, rose hips, the fruit of wild roses, appear in many traditions as nutrient-rich additions to teas or syrups during colder months. Scandinavian, Eastern European, and Asian cultures all valued rose hips for their bright flavor and seasonal relevance. This category teaches an important lesson. Communities always paid close attention to plants that appeared right when they needed them, often in late summer, fall, or early spring. Nature's timing rarely goes unnoticed in traditional systems. While leaves and flowers get most of the attention, roots hold some of the deepest stories in the plant world. Roots are where a plant anchors itself, stores energy, and prepares for difficult seasons. And throughout history, root-based preparations were considered grounding physically and symbolically. One of the most iconic wild roots is burdock. Burdock grows huge leaves and sends down a taproot that can reach impressive lengths. In Japanese tradition, burdock, known as gobo, is still widely used as food. In European folk practice, the root was dried for winter use. Another root with a powerful history is dandelion root. While the leaves are often used fresh, the roots were traditionally dried, roasted, or brewed. Many cultures saw it as a plant that connected people to the earth's seasonal rhythms. Then there's yellow dock, easily recognized by its tall seed stalks and reddish root. European and Native American traditions used yellow dock in tonics and simple preparations, often as part of seasonal cleansing practices. And perhaps the most surprising, wild carrot, also known as Queen Anne's lace. Its root is aromatic and has a long history of culinary and traditional herbal use, though it should never be confused with toxic lookalikes. In ancient texts, wild carrot appears frequently in discussions of food and plant lore. Roots remind us that plants aren't just what we see above ground. Their true power often lies hidden beneath the surface. Every homestead, every village, every community had go-to plants for minor daily issues, plants used for scratches, bumps, bites, or simple outdoor mishaps. These weren't dramatic remedies. They were practical ones. One plant that consistently appears in historical records is yarrow. Its feathery leaves and clustered white flowers grow in fields, yards, and roadside patches. Ancient Greeks, Native Americans, and Europeans all used yarrow in traditional first aid contexts. Its nickname, soldier's herb, appears in multiple cultures. Another everyday helper is jewelweed, a plant that often grows near poison ivy. Indigenous groups noticed this pairing long ago and used jewelweed as a traditional wash for irritated skin. Even today, many foragers consider it one of nature's clever combinations. Broadleaf plantain, once again, belongs here too. Its cooling leaves made it a go-to poultice plant for centuries. And then there's chickweed, a tender plant that grows in cool seasons. In European tradition, chickweed was used in poultices and soothing salves. Backyard first aid plants highlight a simple truth. Humans used what grew closest. When you needed something immediately, you didn't travel miles, your solution was already underfoot. Before supermarkets and supplements, people relied on year-round tonic plants. Those used in traditional systems to support overall wellness during seasonal transitions. Many of these plants naturalized and can still be found growing wild. One example is red clover, a plant seen in meadows, fields, and lawns. European herbal texts often mention red clover in relation to tonics and teas. Its presence in agricultural landscapes made it familiar and accessible. Another is wood sorrel, a bright little plant with heart-shaped leaves. Children often found it first because of its refreshing sour taste. Historically, it appeared in spring tonics and simple preparations. Wild violet, with its beautiful purple flowers, was once a valued early spring plant. In Victorian Europe, violets symbolized renewal, and both leaves and flowers appeared in traditional recipes. And finally, horehound, a wild aromatic plant mentioned in ancient Greek and Roman records. It grows in disturbed soils and sunny edges, and its bitter flavor made it a traditional ingredient in tonics and old-fashioned candies. When I walk through old homesteads, these tonic plants are often the last survivors long after buildings have collapsed and fences have turned to dust. They outlive us, reminding us of the long relationship between humans and the land. When you look at your backyard now, I hope you see more than just weeds. You're looking at a living archive, a collection of plants that once played vital roles in homes, communities, and entire cultures. These plants fed people, soothed discomfort, symbolized protection, and supported seasonal wellness. They weren't chosen because they were trendy. They were chosen because they were there, accessible, dependable, familiar. And after decades of studying them, I've learned something important. The closer we pay attention, the more nature teaches us. Backyard plants aren't just remnants of the past. They're reminders of a time when humans lived in conversation with the land, not separate from it. So the next time you step outside, take a moment to notice what's growing at your feet. That simple act of awareness is how every herbal tradition began: one plant, one moment of curiosity. Thank you for exploring this world with me. Remember, the value of a plant isn't determined by its price or by how rare it is. Sometimes the most remarkable plants are the ones growing quietly behind your house, waiting for someone to pay attention.